All right, people. I keep getting emails from people telling me to dismantle some of the arguments of this Thomas Sowell guy.
I know I'm gonna regret this. Vaush's followers were being the worst of the dregs of humanity after last time, but you guys wanted me to, so here we are.
And apparently he's one of the foundational thinkers of the right and blah, blah, blah.
Libertarian, not right. Learn the difference, Vaush. He had a lot of opposition from the right. Of course, to people like you, anyone who isn't on your team just gets lumped into the same category, even if they are as different from each other as they are from you.
I think we're talking at cross purposes. On the one hand, we're talking about results.
So, this is Thomas Sowell dismantles egalitarianism.
Actually, no. It's from the post-episode debate in Milton Friedman's series Free to Choose, Episode 5, Created Equal. I'm sure the clip on YouTube is titled that way, but it's nice to know you don't do the first bit of research into what these clips are and where they come from.
Okay, so there are two types of equality. Equality of outcome and equality of process. Equality from a sort of foundational position.
Equality of opportunity, Vaush. For the love of Mike, do you not even understand the basics of this debate?
Because nobody has the same opportunities in life. It's more, have we done everything we can to ensure that everyone's getting a fair shake?
Equality of opportunity is just another way of saying impartiality. It just means we're not going to put in any artificial barriers to their success.
Let me be perfectly clear about this. Nobody talks about equality of outcome. Nobody does. Absolutely nobody. Nobody. Zero people do.
Nobody, huh?
It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
Well, that's embarrassing for you.
The concept of equality of outcome is this nebulous, dystopic, concept that nobody seriously advocates for in politics. Nobody does.
Except for, the president and vice president. Why don't we listen to another part of this debate so you can hear for yourself someone advocating for what you say no one advocates for, as well as Sowell's response.
The argument about equality of results was an argument that was linked to equality of opportunity. People recognized that unless there was a degree of equality in a degree of enough food, enough security, access to education, unless these things were available to all children, then equality of opportunity was merely a mockery. That's why equality of results became an issue, and it became an issue for black people in the United States, and they expressed their concern,
No,
whatever the opinion
You expressed
polls,
it, damn it. Look.
They
No, they did not. They did not.
They
Damn
expressed
Francis, finish it and then reply.
They expressed their will by their extraordinary participation in a protest movement that began in the late 1950s and didn't end until the 1960s. Intellectuals were not in that protest movement.
You want me to answer or you want to keep on?
In that process.
You want me to answer?
I finished.
Yes.
Good. Black people have never supported, for example, affirmative action, quotas, anything of that sort. Wherever polls have been taking a black opinion on such matters of should people be paid equally or should there be this or that, black people have never taken a position that you describe. So it is not a question of what black people chose to do. It's what you choose to put in the mouths of black people. It is what you choose to project. It is not what any black people have ever said anywhere that you can put your finger on.
See what you miss when you don't watch the whole thing? Unless it comes to turn out you did watch the whole thing. Gee, that'd be really embarrassing for you, wouldn't it? If you'd seen every word of this exchange and still made the same claim? That'd just be silly and dumb.
So what he's essentially arguing right now is that any time any sort of differentiated status is given to a certain group of people, it's dumb because there's diversity amongst people. This is an idiotic perspective. I have no idea what these two things have to do with one another.
Maybe you should actually try watching the whole thing and turn on your brain for once. It's not like it's that difficult.
So Because Sowell is a conservative and thus must necessarily simp for corporations at every conceivable opportunity.
Where is he doing anything resembling simping for corporations? Can you find one clip of him doing anything like that? Or do you have to pretend that's what he's doing because you can't respond to what he really said?
What he's arguing for here is any sort of privileged position established by the government in any sense is actually an attempt to enforce equality of outcome.
Wrong way around, Einstein. He's saying that any attempt to enforce equality of outcome means giving groups of people privileged positions.
Here's the problem. First of all, the government is not the only institutions that put people into categories.
The government's the only one that enforces them.
The idea that people are on a completely level playing field from ground set and then the government is the one that fucks with the scales is a complete libertarian lie.
What are you talking about? Both Sowell and Friedman were saying the exact opposite. Friedman's point throughout the episode, and the part of Sowell's statement that you just played, were saying that people are not fundamentally equal from the start, and that's a good thing. Let's hear it from Friedman, same episode.
There's nothing fair about one man being born of a wealthy parent and one of an impecunious parent. There's nothing fair about Muhammad Ali having been born with a skill that enables him to make millions of dollars one night. There's nothing fair about Marlene Dietrich having great legs that we all want to watch. There's nothing fair about any of that. But on the other hand, don't you think a lot of people who like to look at Marlene Dietrich's legs benefited from nature's unfairness in producing a Marlene Dietrich? What kind of a world would it be if everybody was an absolute identical duplicate of anybody else? You might as well destroy the whole world and just keep one specimen left for a museum. In the same way, it's unfair that Muhammad Ali should be a great fighter and should be able to earn millions. But would it not be even more unfair to the people who like to watch him if you said that in the pursuit of some abstract ideal of equality, we're not going to let Muhammad Ali get more for one night's fight than the lowest man on the totem pole can get for a day's unskilled work on the docks? You could do that, but the result of that would be to deny people the opportunity to watch Muhammad Ali.
So the only way you can make an argument is by lying about the libertarian argument, then appropriating the libertarian argument for your own. How pathetic can you get?
It's not true. People are not born in equal positions.
They said that people weren't born equal, liar!
People are born to poor and wealthy families, to good and bad school districts, in neighborhoods which may or may not have good job opportunities.
And the relevant question is, what system gives them the greatest opportunity for advancement? And as we've seen over and over again, and as this very episode shows, no system has ever been shown to have the greatest gains for the lowest rungs of the ladder other than free market capitalism. In every other system, including socialism, wealth stays within the class, being inherited or with the political class or whatever. The degree to which people who don't have wealth are able to gain it for themselves and their children is directly related to how capitalist the country is. The poorest people are better off with capitalism. That is a fact, and none of your bleeding and lying can change it.
But there are ways in which the government can impose power to actually enhance freedom, like, for example, welfare.
Hey, I thought you started out saying that no one claims this.
Countries with higher welfare have higher wealth mobility.
Lie, 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 lie! There is no correlation between more welfare and higher wealth or income mobility. There is a correlation between both wealth and income mobility and economic freedom. If you're just gonna lie about reality, then you have nothing.
Because if you're born poor in America, you're likely to stay poor.
As I've shown in numerous videos, 92% of millionaires and 62% of billionaires in America are self-made.
Welfare is a mechanism that enhances human freedom.
No, it doesn't. Welfare puts people into the poverty trap. Again, as I've shown over and over again in numerous videos, before the welfare state, the percentage of Americans in poverty was dropping like a stone, and the people who were poor in one year were largely not the same people who were poor in previous years. they were largely newcomers to the economy, such as immigrants. But after welfare, for the first time in well over a century, not only was the poverty rate no longer dropping and actually even started going up a bit, but also the same people were staying in poverty year after year, to the point of having multi-generational poverty.
And by the way, this info like this is explicitly designed to serve the political interests of corporations. There's a reason why they go for this sort of thing.
Really? Because I see corporation after corporation lobbying for things like welfare, increased regulation, and bigger government, not less. Again, people like Vaush have to lie about it to cover for the fact that this whole thing about dividing people into classes is what they want. Libertarianism, free market capitalism, isn't about corporations or the bourgeois or anything else. It's about the individual. And in an economic context, that means the consumer. And everyone is a consumer. Everyone has to eat. Everyone needs clothes to wear. Everyone wants things that can increase their quality of life. Benefiting the consumer means benefiting everyone, which is why you'll never hear people like Vaush bring that up.
That's why equality of results became an issue.
Oh, so you did see this part. Well, I guess you were just lying then when you said nobody advocated this.
Just FYI, this guy studied at the Chicago school under Friedman, the same school and people that supported Pinochet in Chile.
Lie, 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 lie! This is a disgusting lie that's been refuted as many times as it's been made. Friedman never once supported Pinochet. You're a disgusting person, Vaush! Notice that what he'll never do is actually show what Friedman said. I will.
This says you supported Pinochet or advised Pinochet.
I never advised Pinochet. I never supported Pinochet.
We'll throw that one away.
But, hold on. No, I don't want to evade the question.
All right.
Chile was a case in which a military regime headed by Pinochet was willing to switch the organization of the economy from a top-down to a bottom-up performance. And in that process, a group of people who had been trained at the University of Chicago in the Department of Economics, who came to be called the Chicago Boys, played a major role in designing and implementing the economic reforms. The real miracle in Chile was not that those economic reforms worked so well. Chile is by all odds the best success story in Latin America today. The real miracle is not that those economic arrangements worked so well, because that's what Adam Smith said. The real miracle is that a military junta was willing to let them do it. See, as I said to begin with, the principles of the military is from the top down. The principle of a market is from the bottom up. Now, it's a real miracle that a military group was willing to let a bottom-up approach take over. And as you know, as I say, I did make a trip to Chile, and I made talks in Chile. In fact, I did meet with Mr. Pinochet, but I was never advised by him. I never got a penny from the Chilean government. I was never an advisor to him. But I will say that that process led to a situation in which you were able to get an election which ended the military junta, and you now have a democratic government. You cannot cite any similar example from the world of entirely socialist states. So I was not an advisor to Pinochet. I was not an advisor to the Chilean government, but I am more than willing to share in the credit for the extraordinary job that our students did down there.
How moronic do you have to be to take someone whose ideas led to the introduction of democracy and the removal of a dictator from power and say that this somehow means he supported that dictator?
Dude, what the fuck is wrong with him? He talked for way longer than her.
That's complete bullshit, Vaush. Watch the whole thing. He actually says relatively little in this half-hour segment.
Wait, black people have never taken the position that they should be paid equally to white people?
Not what he said, liar! But I linked to the whole thing. People can watch it and see Vaush's lies for themselves. They don't need me to do it here.
I mean, I don't have like polling data on hand. First of all, I don't need to support the popularity of these arguments to actually defend them. Even if nobody on Earth defended these arguments, they would still be perfectly valid.
He wasn't the one who brought up the polls, liar! She was! And you were saying she owned him! So she says, oh, black people want this! And he says, no, they don't. And then you say, well, that doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, then her argument is invalid and there's nothing to respond to.
You're telling me black people literally fought in the civil rights movement to not be able to be discriminated against in the employment.
They fought against Jim Crow laws. And in case you're too stupid to figure this out, they're called Jim Crow laws because they were, in fact, laws. Laws passed by Democrats, by the way. Apropos of nothing, read this conversation, but it'd be really nice if people would stop trying to pretend that Democrats and progressives, they of the eugenics movement, were the friends of blacks. Especially since policies like minimum wage, welfare, and many others are products of the eugenics movement.
So first of all, he lies and makes up a position of black people, and then he says the person trying to help black people is the real racist because they're pushing the narrative that black people don't want to be second-class citizens into the mouths of black people.
The only one I see lying about what other people are saying here is you.
It is not what any black people have ever said anywhere that you can put your finger on.
No black person has ever said they want equal pay for equal work.
See? Outright lie! It's not even close to what Sowell was saying. He was talking about affirmative action. Vaush is a liar!
Wait, he claims that the polls support him, and then he jokes about having never actually seen the polls? And they're clapping?
Again, not what he said. Piven said Sowell was putting words into the mouth of pollsters. He deflected her lie with a joke.
There's no question about what equality of results, if it comes about through a framework of freedom, is a desirable result.
Nobody talks about equality of results.
You just played the clip of Francis Fox Piven talking about just that. What are you trying to pull here?
If a white guy went up there and said, black people don't want this, they would obviously and rightfully be called racist for it. But you find one black guy in a million who will say shit like,
funny. He looks at Thomas Sowell, and he doesn't see an accomplished, well-respected, self-made economist born to a single mother in the Jim Crow South and lived in Harlem from age 9 who got himself into Harvard despite having dropped out of high school to support his family. No. Vaush doesn't see any of that. He just sees a black guy. And since it's a black guy who takes a position he doesn't agree with, he sees him as a mere token. He's the one being racist here. Which is no surprise considering he's the one who's been defending eugenics policies like welfare. And now you know why he has to lie about what Sowell is saying.
That in point of fact, you get greater equality of actual results by a system under which people are free to achieve unequal results. That for the poor people of the world...
Nobody is talking about building a system where people aren't free to achieve unequal results. He just said something tautological. Did you hear that? People are more free if they're free to have different results.
No, liar. He said you have more equal results if they're free to have different results. So you lied about Sowell, and now you're lying about Friedman too. Shouldn't be surprised. And I'm not.
The deregulation that takes place is not for small mom and pop companies, it's for big oil.
In what way was big oil ever deregulated? Again, we've shown this over and over again. All regulations increase the cost of doing business, so the inevitable result of more regulations is to make it more difficult for startups to form and compete with established corporations.
Trust me, when this guy talks about deregulation, he is not talking about making it easier for some fucking low-income black family in Harlem to start a fucking coffee shop. He's talking about the ability for the United Fruit Company to invade Latin American countries.
Anyone who's seen the Free to Choose series knows that this is a lie. In particular, episode 2 goes into this quite a bit, but it's also a running theme throughout the series. So where did Vaush get this information from? He just made it up. He doesn't have a clue what Friedman's position was, and he doesn't care. Because Friedman isn't on his team. Friedman and Sowell are part of the not we. So he gets to tell whatever lies and make up whatever crap he can to try and get people to ignore them.
Ah, yes. The greatest source of inequality has been affirmative action and welfare.
Well, they were cooked up by the eugenicists for a reason.
Damn, good thing nobody's talking about equality of outcome.
Unbelievable. I'm gonna let Sowell have the last word on this one.
I would go beyond the question of equality and put it more generally, that any process to ascribe any status to any group of people, equality, inferiority, superiority, must necessarily reduce freedom, because whatever the government wishes to ascribe to any group, whatever place, to use the phrase that was very common in the South, that blacks should have their place, whatever place the government is going to assign to people, that place will not coincide, that place will not coincide either with what all those people are doing or with how others perceive all those people, because there's too much diversity among human beings. To maintain any system of ascribed status from the top is going to mean reducing people's freedom across the spectrum. That's the point.
So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.